Bonsoir YouTube, bonsoir tout le monde, et bienvenue à la podcast, and I'll stop that now. We just watched the season finale, Doctor Who's first ever season finale, no less. The Reign of Terror, also known as the French Revolution, which I'll say it's not my favourite historical story. It's pretty intriguing, I suppose. It's got quite a lot going on plot-wise, a lot of characters, and it maybe doesn't leave a massive impression. There were definitely a few things that sort of interested me. Perhaps it was a little bit long at 6 episodes. I can't think of much else to say, so I'll hand it over first of all to Citizen Coqui. What did you think of the Reign of Terror?
Citizen Coqui was bored out of his mind. Yeah, this was... I love the other two historical serials, but this was just... I couldn't, like... It's not that I couldn't follow it, it's that I couldn't, like, care enough to really follow a lot of it. I'm not sure if it's like what was the other serial that I really hated, The End of Days, or the ones that they were trapped in the TARDIS?
Oh, The Edge of Destruction.
Yeah. In any case, this was a bit of a weak note to finish on. Susan seemed to have reverted a bit after those two strong serials. You know.
She's in prison for quite some time, isn't she?
Yeah, and, rats are pretty scary. But, what I did like was the animated reconstruction. Not that the story was any better, I just thought they looked cool.
I was going to ask about that, actually. Yes, of course, I was going to have Derek Handley on this week, who does the Telesnap recons. But no, this is actually from the BBC DVD. There's a couple where they've done pretty good animation, and I think that the fact that they've done it with love, not just money, but love and care. The faces are right. That's why it works. I'm not saying it's seamless. I wondered what you'd think of live action, animation, live action again. It's not seamless, but it does work.
The fight was kind of silly looking, though, animated. That was probably the weakest point of the animation. Though, granted, I'm not sure if they would have acted it out much better.
So what was the weakest part?
The fight, when they were about to kill Ian and then there was a firefight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the animation was really wonky but the thing is, like, their acting would probably be in that same general ballpark. Overall, I liked the first season, but yeah, this was a weak note to go out on.
Like, second worst, you think?
Yeah, I'm almost tempted to put it at worst, just because it was so much longer. But yeah, it's down there.
I would agree. Actually, I've always found it quite hard to follow as well, and maybe that is it, that somehow they don't give you enough emotional investment, or... I do know it was a very troubled production, that the director had a nervous breakdown halfway through, but there were lots and lots of factors for that. It's actually a bit of a mystery who even directed the second half. But anyway, enough with trivia. James, your thoughts on the Reign of Terror. Citizen James, your thoughts on the Reign of Terror.
Yes, vive la revolution. And first of all, the fundamental point, the reason why both you and Coqui dislike this episode, I'm not too keen on it either, and probably the reason why you're going to dislike the Sea Beggar, Coqui, another episode which follows the same basic formula, is that this is a pure historical serial. I said episode before, I meant to say serial, excuse me. This is a pure historical serial, emphasis on history. That, yes, maybe the education system is failing, maybe we don't care as much about the French Revolution anymore, but in the 1960s, every school child would have known who, I can't remember, Robespierre actually, would have known Robespierre, would have known the Scarlet Pimpernel, would have known at least something of the history of the French Revolution. So this was a drama woven into. This was a drama plot woven into historical events, kind of like one review I saw of an Assassin's Creed video game set during the American Revolution. Oh yes, you just have to stop by the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the Boston Tea Party, etc. Yes, assassins working in this period would have naturally had front row seats to this kind of things. Yes. So the mandate to the mandate of the original Doctor Who to include real history has crippled this serial. The only reason why I adore the Sea Beggar more, when other people have exactly the same criticisms of that serial, that it's slow, that it's boring, that you don't know what's going on, that it's far too long, etc., is that I am interested in the period of history in which the Sea Beggar is set. You know, the events leading up to the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. So, ultimately, the serial itself, again, what is there to be said? Edge of Destruction, Brink of Disaster. Well, it was irritating, it was sickening, literally all of the paranoia and suspicion, finger-pointing just made me physically nauseous, but at least it was only 2 episodes. It's not as insulting, but it lasts long. No, I would definitely put this above... Edge of Destruction, because whilst it's not great, there's nothing reprehensible about it. There's nothing that deliberately turns me off. So,
yeah, I do like how they, try to talk about the good of the revolution, even though there's the bad guys at that time. Or Barbara's like, before judging, look at the history book. So, there is something of a message there, when talking about, the conflict between the old way and, yes, and, I like the values. They were talking about honor and order and, how it's important to hold on to these things. And, he doesn't outright oppose freedom, but in the presence of anarchy, he felt that it just isn't worth it. Which, yes, is nice.
That's the thing with revolutions replacing one. The dream is democracy and freedom, but the result is almost always replacing one tyranny with an even worse tyranny. But, one scene that really stuck out for me, I think it was either the first episode or the second, when the French aristocrat who was a part of the Underground Railroad at the farmhouse where the companions happened to land, near where the companions happened to land, captured by soldiers. He just says, "Who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing?" Something like that. And these soldiers, armed with muskets and bayonets, all cower. You see, Sergeant, put a peasant in a uniform, give him a musket, and he's still a peasant. The idea that you can't just wash away the old system that quickly. That was a standout. That moment stands out in my mind. The whole quest for the English agent James Sterling, the plans to invade Britain, and so on and so on and so forth. It's again not bad, but the only truly beautiful, artistic, and a memorable thing about this serial, Citizen Alex, is the photo that you've used as your thumbnail here on Skype. We have to use that as the screen capture for the podcast when we put.
That's going to be my avatar on the video.
But still, if you can find that. If you can find that photo, even link that photo in the description. Barbara and Susan in prison together in their 18th century French garb, both sleeping, Susan sleeping on Barbara's shoulder. It's such a beautiful image. But as I say, that's the most beautiful and artistic thing, the most worthy thing to come from the entire serial.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of other bits that I liked, which, are a bit fragmented. Well, there was that whole thing about, like, this really bossy overseer making them shuffle or whatever, and, the plot to sort of hide the money or whatever. The doctor, he's being clever, he's being violent, which, granted, I suppose the modern doctors are much more action-oriented, but this doctor seems to be much more overtly violent than I remember Eccleston, Tennant, or Smith being.
Yes, it's the distinction between actual violence, as would have been shown in Shakespearean plays, actual plays, TV series, etc., and the more cartoonish Hollywood violence. The A-Team. The car rolls down the cliff, and you have to show all of the passengers running away before the car explodes. Using homemade guns every week, but no one is ever actually killed. There is a difference between using fireworks and pretty colours to maintain the audience's attention and actually showing true violence. So when we use the term violence, especially when describing things like New Doctor Who, Hollywood, etc., we have to understand what we mean. Just because someone is using a gun and things are exploding doesn't mean that it's necessarily violent, just that it's a anger-fueled fireworks display.
I like how the doctor originally tried to leave with the last word by saying that maybe if you use your energy helping them instead of yelling at them, it'd get done. And he thought that he could just walk away after that. It's like, you think you could just, like, tell someone off and be on your way? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So again, as much as that scene is one of the few things that stands out about this serial, it was entirely superfluous. There was no reason for it to exist except to pad out the ridiculously extended runtime.
I think there's a danger here that Coqui might think that this is the worst historical, when unfortunately... Well, like James knows what I'm
I'm in my happy place.
You'll know it when you get to. In fact, when I was asked, this one which I think is actually a season or two away, but when I was asked, are there any bad Hartnell, or what do you think is a bad Hartnell serial? And the only one I really could say was this one that I'm not mentioning yet. You'll know it when we get there. In any case, right, so generally then, I'm thinking, is there even any point in asking how many sonic screwdrivers out of 10? Because you're both going to say like 1 or 2, aren't you?
I don't like scales between 1 and 10.
But neither do I. To reduce a complex opinion to a numerical value is disingenuous. However, I just want to stress this series isn't bad. If you have a genuine interest in the French Revolution, just as I have a genuine interest into the religious schism leading up to St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, then this will be one of the best historical serials for you. It's just that if you have little existing knowledge and little interest in the subject matter, then it is a banal and mediocre serial, which
I think they
follows a formula.
They could have done more with Napoleon. And also, it occurred to me watching it, the obvious thing for them to have done would be that the Doctor turns out to be the Scarlet Pimpernel.
No, but the point is, this is the reign of terror before Napoleon. So the whole point that it has to revolve around Robespierre, and so just hinting at Napoleon, only showing him briefly in the inn. Wanted to avoid saying that, but yes, this Corsican general who has the support of the people. Again, if you know the history, etc., how he was supposed to be part of a ruling council, but then seized absolute power through control of the military. It's an intriguing political. It's an intriguing political plot. It's like people can't stand the Trade Federation war in the first Star Wars prequel. Oh God, I can just imagine when the infamous Star Wars scrolling text at the beginning of the film mentions that there's a political dispute. Oh God, politics!
Yes. Well, okay, and I think, we've discussed the animation. We've already established we don't think, apart from a rather nice bit at the very, very end there. It's a very curious thing, actually, which I'd never noticed before, which is you get the Doctor's speech, which sort of tells you this is the end of the season, no Doctor Who for a few months. But that was clearly guaranteed a second season, because what's interesting is they already decided to do Planet of the Giants. So, of course, it comes up next episode, Planet of Giants. So they did that even when it was months to go before the next. I didn't know that or had forgotten. But yes, nice little speech at the end. But apart from that, as a season finale, we're thinking it wasn't the strongest to end on. But let's move on now to having a Doctor Who Season 1 overview. And with the perspective that, remember, this was a funny little show that a lot of people thought wouldn't work. William Hartnell believed in it. He would say years later that he knew that it would run for years. He knew it would be a success. And, of course, Doctor Who became, and still is, a massive global phenomena. This was the first ever season from 1963/1964. Citizen Coqui, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, now, I poke fun at, the acting, particularly in some of the more action-oriented seasons, or segments. But in terms of striking people with that sense of awe to make the world and the universe seem vast and wonderful and lots of things with lots of things to explore. I think it was quite successful in that regard. I really do watch this with this sort of feeling of wow, there's so many interesting things to learn. And I think that it is far, far more effective than a lot of the educational television that I've seen, in modern day. Not that it was especially educational because there are only bits here and there, but the point is it inspires you to want to learn, which I think that's really difficult to do. And, even with their technological limitations and their funny little acting quirks, they did an amazing job.
Mm-hmm. And would you still say that? Well, obviously, I doubt the opinion has changed. We're probably all going to vote the Aztecs to be the best serial of the season.
Marco Polo.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I loved Marco Polo, but the Aztecs for me, it's not even like reconstruction versus live action. It's just that fight at the end. It was a really nice climax. But yeah.
Yeah, the finale to the final episode to the Aztecs generally is just fantastic. Would you prefer to see, assuming they don't find it because Marco Polo might exist somewhere, but failing that, would you prefer to see it animated, like in the same way that some of Reign of Terror was?
That would be awesome.
I'm amazed that it hasn't all been animated and released on DVD already. Considering the international success of Doctor Who.
I think they were planning it, and it's because of more than rumours, trying to secure deals to get...
The moment I finished speaking, I thought, oh wait, who owns the copyrights?
That's one of the clues to... it's the BBC, and one of the clues to if they may have found missing episodes is when they cancel DVD releases, and this has happened. So, we didn't get, recons of those two Troughton stories that were found recently, and then, of course, hang on, and then the rumours that they'd been found came out, and there's rumours there's more.
So BBC agents have broken into Obama's safe in the White House.
Yes, of course, exactly. James, your season 1 overview.
As I've pointed out time and time again throughout Doctor Who Fridays, the contrast between between the first season and new Doctor Who truly demonstrates how much the world has changed in the last 50 years. So similar, and yet at the same time so different. The things that Coqui and others dislike about the original series, for the acting specifically, are the same things which I love about it, and vice versa. I can't stand the acting in the new Doctor Who, and by extension all modern television, the fact that everything is trying to be a Hollywood film. Yes, William Hartnell knowing that it was going to be a success, it kind of sounds like a false prediction. Oh yes, of course, I always knew that it was. Oh yes, of course, I only took the job because I was desperately struggling to avoid being put in the old folks' home, desperately struggling to prove to myself that I was still an actor and that I could still do the job.
That's harsh. Although I think one problems with this serial was the demanding schedule and Hartnell's health were beginning to show, and he was very irritable.
Yes, I apologise for making that sound like an insult against Hartnell himself. If anyone, especially people who knew Hartnell or related to Mr. Hartnell, are listening to this, then I do apologise. I was simply pointing out how the underlying motivations for something are often discarded in hindsight. That, yes, we can start doing something for all manner of different reasons to make money, to continue our career because it's a job, etc. But then when it turns out to be an international smash hit, the longest running science fiction series in television history. Of course, I always knew that it was going to be a hit. Yes, right.
I think if you were working on early Doctor Who, you'd sense the kind of magic, the energy when you're there. You kind of, And also, it's good to have faith in a project. I mean, Hartnell, I think...
There's a difference between having faith in... Well, this depends what we mean by successful. Was Hartnell saying, yes, we knew we'd get beyond 18 episodes?
I think he said he knew it would run for years and years.
Again, was that just hyperbole? We could spend all day.
As for his motivations, as I've discussed before, he felt very, very typecast as gangsters, army officers, always playing the tough guy.
Yeah.
And of course, yes, of course. Okay, people have been saying in this series how tough the Hartnell character is, and of course, actually, he's positively a pussycat compared to some of his other roles.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, this is also kind of random, but I just remembered something about this serial, the Reign of Terror. Towards the end, the Doctor's speech towards the end, as opposed to the Aztecs, where the Doctor seemed to question the efficacy of interfering with the timeline. It seems as though he was a bit more stressing the futility of trying to mess with the timeline. That no matter what they did, things would always end up the same. And so that would mean that the only difference between this serial and say the Cavemen or one of the ones that Marinus, is that in the case of the French Revolution, they knew what would happen, and that's why they'd feel tempted to change it. But they don't care in the Keys of Marinus because they just don't know what's going to happen, even though they equally are a part of history.
No, again, we have to remember that the whole wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, fixed points, what have you, is a plot point that, yes, we can change the fictional history of fictional planets and fictional races to our heart's content, but no, human history is fixed. We don't want idiots going into school and saying the Titanic sank because the Doctor wasn't there to save them.
Well referenced, James, well referenced. Yes, well, I personally would just throw out the excuse that if you've read those history books, then that means that you can't change it, because then how could you have read it in the history books then? So it's kind of cyclical. Okay, well, I think we've got that covered. So, time for final thoughts. Citizen Coqui.
Great season, not a very good serial. Really looking forward to the next one because it has giants in the title. Makes me think of Shingeki no Kyojin. Wondering if the Doctor's going to start playing the Titans. I interrupt our ending bit with the Attack on Titan theme songs, but unfortunately I'm not that confident in my German or Japanese.
I now have this image in my mind of William Hartnell swinging around on cables, slicing Titans across the back of the neck.
That would be awesome.
They could animate it. Oh my god! I've got the idea for a Japanese anime in my mind now.
We've just spontaneously improvised a fan fiction crossover.
Yes. And of course, Susan screaming as always, and Barbara just sort of sitting at the back.
I mean, they could conceivably be the same universe, right? Or would this be around the same period of time that the solar flare things are happening? I don't know.
But anyway, Susan doesn't just scream.
That was hyperbole.
I was making a joke, James, don't worry. Anyway, your final thoughts and goodbye.
Yes, overall, I absolutely adore the first season, even though the finale was lackluster at best, unless you have a passionate interest in the French Revolution. Indeed, I would say that even the Tom Baker era can't compete overall with the glory of serials like The Tribe of Gum, the Cavemen serial. Marco Polo or the Aztecs. But then again, we have to remember that this series, the first series of Doctor Who, was created in 63, 64 for an audience of people in that era. That's like studying the rings inside the trunk of a tree that have been cut down. The fact that Doctor Who has lasted for so long means that we can look back through time and see the changes in British television and British culture throughout that period. The Doctor being much more overtly sexist, violent and grumpy. Susan being little more than a teenage screaming machine. I realise that wasn't her character overall. Just as Barbara wasn't solely a fifth wheel, that Barbara did have parts to play. In the Aztecs, in particular, she was the dynamic, the driving force of the entire serial. However, overall, it's just so interesting to see the differences, to see the changes. Yes, this first season of Doctor Who was never recreated because it couldn't have been recreated. Tom Baker, probably, or definitely my favourite Doctor of them all. His series were created in the 1970s, and as a result, his stories, his serials, were all for a 1970s audience, reflecting the culture and the attitudes of that period. It's as glorious as it was. It could never be that glorious again. And but so yes, even though so much of it is reconstructed, even if you are not sure about Shakespearean theatrical acting, I do highly recommend that everyone go back to the beginning and experience 50 years of television history, the development of a culture, along with some of the greatest stories ever written and ever recorded in science fiction. You can't just say that Doctor Who started in 2005. And yes, as always, may the great holy donkey bless your house for 7 generations.
Aha. Right, well, yes, I mean, 26 years the classic series ran for, and yeah, I think you see quite a progression of social change and media change and attitude, and yes, of course, at this point, Kennedy's only just been shot and everything's black and white. Yeah. And the first Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Susan era is one of my favourite eras in the history of the show. And I'm a bit sad that we seem to be getting through it so fast. But, yes, I know you like Stephen, James. We'll get well, we'll be back next week when we begin commenting on the second ever season of Doctor Who. In the meantime, though, remember, our lives are important, at least to us. But as we see, so we learn. Our destiny is in the stars, so let's go out and search for it. Next episode, Land of Giants. Wow.